My name is Eric Brown. I live in Frisco, Texas. My kids go to Heritage High. My son, Montana Brown, died December 14th, 2013 from what he thought was acid, LSD. He was told that it was that, but what he got instead was 25-IM bomb, which is a research chemical that was banned about 29 days before Montana got a hold of it by the DEA. It's a drug that is often passed off to kids as acid, as there is very little acid on the streets these days. Man, he was a nut. He had a crazy sense of humor. He was very adventurous, extremely athletic. He was the fastest kid in the 400 meter in district when he was in the 8th grade. He played football. He played soccer. He was a really great swimmer. The first time he ever got in the pool at the natatorium, he finished a couple of feet behind a kid who had just been to state the year before, and Montana never had swam competitively ever before, so that was pretty cool. He was into wrestling. The kid would climb anything, flagpoles, schools. I mean, watch out. He was kind of an adrenaline junkie. He's the first one to, bungee dive or just do anything crazy. I mean, if the night the police called me to tell me that there was a problem, I figured he'd gotten caught lighting a bag of dog excrement on fire on somebody's step. I mean, he was a practical joker. He really had a real diverse group of friends. He brought a lot of people of different backgrounds together. He was a real leader, but just funny, crazy, practical jokes, and he was somebody that could unite a lot of different people. Basically, I was out of town on business with my wife, and I had left Rory in charge, my oldest, and I left on a Sunday. There was one particular kid I said, don't have over while I'm out of town. He was a friend of theirs. I knew he was kind of like the hookup for stuff they shouldn't do. And I'd been aware of some stuff that they had done, and we'd had a lot of talks about it. And, we're hoping that that was behind them. But they decided they were going to have a little party for Rory going out of town. So the boys decided they're going to get some mushrooms. And they spend all week trying, running their traps, trying to find it from their friends. And they couldn't find any. And this friend hookup had this lady who he was asking her if she knew how to get some, and she said, well, I can't get you that, but I know a guy that can get you some acid. And so they went and met this 25-year-old college kid down in Addison. And they bought these little square blotters of paper, $10 a piece. They bought 10 of them. The boys had Googled it when they couldn't find mushrooms and thought it would be fun to trip on. It's not what they got. They didn't know enough to be wary of these research chemicals that are being passed off as this stuff. So they took one of the squares and they waited a couple hours, and I guess nothing was really happening. And so they took some more, and pretty soon the boys thought Montana was messing with him, just being the jokester that he was. He kept doing and saying the same thing over and over and over again. Kind of like a little dance, a little movement in the same phrase, and then he'd sing a little jingle. And he did this over a dozen times, and they're really freaking out. They're thinking he's just really messing with them. Really what was happening is his brain was backfiring. He was caught in a loop. And all of a sudden he falls down in convulsions, and they're freaking out, and they call a friend who'd been going through some EMT training, and he was on his way to the house. He was there within a couple of minutes of their phone call. And by this time, they got Montana laying on a pillow on the ground, and he's not convulsing anymore. The friend looks at him and thinks everything's okay, and then Montana starts convulsing again. So the friend immediately calls 911, the first responders. Took them 11 minutes to get to my house, and while all this is going on, Montana died in the EMT friend's arms about 3 minutes before the first responders got there. And first responders call me, and I had awakened 20 minutes before I even got the phone call. I'm in California, and I'm just sick to my stomach. I have this terrible feeling that something's wrong, and just a feeling of impending doom and nauseousness. And I look at my phone, and there's a text from Montana responding to a text from me earlier where I told him I loved him and I was proud of him. And he says, I love you too, Dad. And he texted back my wife saying, "I lube you," because that was one of his jokes, because one time auto-corrected lube instead of love, so he thought that was funny. But I'm about ready to settle back down, and I get this call: "Mr. Brown, we're at your house. Your boys have taken what's purportedly LSD. Your youngest son, Montana, is not responding to CPR. We're on our way to Centennial. Call us in a half hour at the hospital." And when I called a half hour later, the ER doctor told me he was dead. We spent the next 12 hours trying to get back from LA. And that's when it all began. I got a call from the detective a half hour later. He's like, "Mr. Brown, this is not a typical LSD acid type reaction. We think this is a research chemical called 25I or 2CE. They weren't sure what variety it was. And they had called the DEA, and immediately we have a DEA officer that went to Frisco High. His kids go to school in Frisco District, and he was there within a half hour, and they knew it wasn't acid, LSD, and they started the process of trying to find out what it was. And a lot more kids have died of this than what people realize, because it's very hard to detect in your bloodstream. It's a dose that you take in micrograms, which is like a couple of grains of salt. And there's only one lab in all the country that can even find it in your system. And that was the one lab that they sent it to, and they forensically found it. And his death certificate says he died of 25I and bomb poisoning. A lot of people want to say when somebody dies of drugs, it's an overdose. Well, with research chemicals, it's not an approved drug. It is a chemical, and in this case, it's a poison. You just don't know how your body's going to react to it. This chemical that comes out of China was used in research projects at Purdue University. And then they released the results of their tests on this research chemical that they tested it on mammals, never in humans. And some chemists in China started producing it, and people here in the United States buy it, and they'll put it on things like blotter paper, they'll put drops of it on candy, sometimes they'll put it in drinks. And the problem is, it's not only got a hallucinogenic psychedelic effect, it has a physiological effect. So you never know how it's going to react with your body. And this was a one-time experimentation for him, and first time he tried it, he died. We've been working here in Texas, my wife and I, to get 5 different laws passed that address synthetic drugs, because the thing about synthetic drugs is there's 2 or 3 new ones appearing every week. In the past, when we've made them illegal in Texas, the chemists simply figure out a new way of constructing the molecule so that it skirts the law. So we've sponsored legislation that addresses that this time. There will be no shortcuts around it. Basically, we have legislation that's going to be called Montana's Law, that if something is acting like a Schedule I drug, something that has been banned, then the governor of Texas will have the powers to immediately make it illegal and impose prison sentences for those making and distributing it. I mean, I blame myself more than anyone. Obviously Montana had a big part to play in his choice to participate in this. So did his brothers, but in the end, everybody, there's so many consequences. I mean, it's been a rough year. There's just all these unimagined consequences. And then when we found out that there were no laws in Texas addressing the issue, that was, more stress. And it wasn't until April that the feds decided they would do something about it. And nobody wins. I mean, just one time, so many people who are trying drugs or using them regularly, 1 out of 17 of them die. 1 of the 3 people who die, it's a first-time experimentation with the substance that kills them. The other 2 out of 3 think they know what they're doing, and they die. And so we've just tried to make other people, especially kids, aware that this thing is out there, and to be careful and watch out for themselves. We're not aware of the consequences. We're not seeing the downside to it. We're only hearing about everybody else doing it. So kids are indulging in it, and they really aren't aware of the dangers or the long-term consequences. Don't leave a drink around strangers or people you don't know. Don't take something from someone you don't know, and man, don't even take it from your friend. I mean, in this case, it was Montana's friend that brought it. Just because your friend's saying, "Hey, try this," it doesn't mean that it's good for you. And just because something might appear to be legal because there aren't laws against it yet, doesn't mean it's safe. I mean, we can obtain firearms in Texas pretty easily through legal channels. It doesn't mean that they're safe. Same thing with these chemicals. I mean, they're coming from a foreign country. Just because you can get it in your mailbox or a friend hands it to you or puts it on a piece of candy doesn't mean it can't harm you. Maybe, in Montana's instance, 3 kids walked away that night. Montana didn't. You just don't know how it's going to interact with your body. My biggest message is we're here for a reason. Life is short, and there are things that we were meant to accomplish in this life. And there's a lot more to life than partying and getting high. And in many instances, it can severely hamper our ability to accomplish the things that we need to do in this life, and just being able to provide a good living for ourselves, to take care of our family, to make a difference in our community. Getting lost in abusing these substances, escaping from reality doesn't change reality. Reality stacks up on you when all you're doing is escaping all the time. And that's all they are. They're an escape. They might seem like a short break, but they're dangerous. They lead to long-term problems like addiction, which leads to job loss, poor economic opportunities, legal consequences, disfigurement, death. And I would just say stay away from it. There's more to life. We have a community page. Montana never had Facebook, and I know most high school kids don't do Facebook anymore, so I have Twitter also, but we keep a Facebook page called Montana Sean Brown, and Sean is spelled S-E-A-N, and I basically make people aware of things that are going on among young people, telling stories about other people who have been harmed or have died, and just keeping awareness of what's going on out there so people can make a choice to avoid it and keep themselves safe.